Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here today. I'm Francisco Espinosa from RDN Global. Today, we have the pleasure to have Scott Britton from Mining Plus and Lee Becker from M3 Engineering. This webinar will be 1 hour long with a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. You can now please start sending your questions by clicking at the Q&A button, which is located at the bottom of your screen. Now, I want to welcome Scott to start this webinar. Good morning, Scott, and welcome for being here.
Good morning, Francisco. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you all for taking the time to spend here this morning or afternoon, as the case may be. We're really going to focus in on some interesting aspects of the emerging SK 1300 regulations that are being applied in the United States by the Securities and Exchange Commission. There's really a lot of information to cover, so I won't spend a lot of time in introductions. Let's get right to the slideshow. If I am speaking too fast for some of my friends, I apologize. It's just nervousness.
No, that's okay. You are in a good place. No worries. So over to you. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. So today, our talk between Lee and myself will really focus on elements of the SK 1300 reporting guidelines previously published by other firms and being implemented as we speak. And, just get going here. One important note that usually is involved in these things is please, if you have questions that would be legal in nature, seek advice from your own general counsel or other legal authority. These are obviously tips and guidelines based on our knowledge, and do not seek to displace any legal opinions. Why should you talk to Mining Plus? Well, Mining Plus is a very innovative mine engineering and design firm made up of engineers and geologists with experience in practical mine design. And our real focus is to get it right the first time. So we sweat the details and go the extra mile to ensure that we understand and deliver value to a client. And like the 1300 regulations, we've delved deeply in there, consulted others, and as these new regulations emerge over the next few years, Mining Plus will stay on top of the changing nature of the interpretations and requirements. In the Americas, North and South America, we have a strong team of mining professionals who have had many years in many different kinds of operations. Globally, we have 10 offices throughout the world in most of the major mining areas, and we pride ourselves into being part of the Byrnecut Group, which is headquartered in Australia but has worldwide and global contacts throughout the globe. We focus our efforts in 3 pillars of operation: defining, planning, and operate. And as a result, why we look at the NI 43-101 and the SK 1300 compliance efforts under our planning pillar, which also includes scoping and pre-feasibility studies to feasibility studies, mining studies, due diligence, that kind of thing, which is central and core to most mining companies as they advance projects. So let's talk about the 5 W's. SK 1300, what you need to know. We want to cover who needs to comply. What was the Industrial Guide 7 is now the SK 1300 requirements. Where we are in that compliance timeline, when is a technical report summary triggered, and why is SK 1300 even needed? Plus a couple of slides on the appendices. Everyone understands some of the global standards that come out of the NI 43-101 compliance, as well as JORC, and SK 1300 now attempts to bring itself into alignment with these other standards, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, we want to look at the qualified person requirements in brief. So who needs to comply? Well, every registrant needs to comply if mining operations are material to its business and financial condition. So single property holders, multiple property holders, vertically integrated manufacturers, royalty companies, even Canadian filers under 20F and 10K, all need to consider their how they file if they are in the United States under SEC rules. Industrial Guide 7 is rather old in today's world. So to try and update those rules, the SEC brought in SK 1300, and it compiles all of the current best knowledge for the public and investors to look at mining properties. So one of the key points of today is that the compliance timeline for SK 1300 has already started. The clock has started. The final rule was published in February of 2019 after several years of comment going back and forth. And those have, since that time, those regulations have been vetted by professional organizations, regulators, investors, mining companies as things can move forward. But as you can see, in today, we are in the latter stages of a voluntary compliance period, 2-year period, for bringing the reports up to the standards required for the SK 1300 regulations. And beginning in January 2021 and after that, companies will be required to provide that information. And as a result, this window is closing rather fast. So when are filings requiring the SK 1300 regulations? Well, a technical report summary is required really for a host of filings. All of the Security Act forms that would be filed by registrants require technical report summaries to be there and placed in the hands of the regulators, as well as the Exchange Act forms, primarily, and I've highlighted the 10K and the 20F annual reports or registration statements that are required. As a result, you have an annual deadline, if you will, to maintain that information. So why does SK 1300 replace the older IG7? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's more to align the SEC's disclosure requirements with, disclosure requirements with the other international standards that are recognized today. And hopefully, even though there are differences, there is a majority of the same requirements for mineral properties. The Commission is responding to investor criticism because in many ways, the old IG7 did not meet the needs of today's sophisticated investors. So let's talk a little bit about the appendices that are here. This is a busy slide. I apologize for it. This shows the chapters. between the NI 43-101 and SK 1300 reports. You can see they're very similar. Then I won't spend a lot of time looking at the details, but they're very similar in the fact that they cover essentially the same ground. The emphasis on different data points and different types of data within those chapters become a challenge for just bringing over the same data, and that's where some of the understanding of the SK 1300 regulations helps bring those reports into compliance quicker. They're not always the same. SK 1300 and NI 43-101, which is our closest neighbor for international standards, there are some differences in it, and it's important that you understand those differences as you bring your reports and information into compliance. The triggers between a technical report summary under SK 1300 versus a technical report under NI 43-101 are somewhat similar, but not always. Obviously, first-time disclosures of mineral resources or reserves need to be disclosed, and material changes to resources and mineral reserves. And material changes obviously differ from the registrant's particular situation, and that is something that's important to recognize as you go forward and evaluate your information. A key component in the technical report summary for under SK 1300 is the qualified person requirement that looks at mineral reserves or exploration results or mineral resources. And that qualified person is a mineral industry professional with at least 5 years of relevant experience in the type of mineralization, the type of deposit. So there's got to be a connection and experience based on what SEC sees as being a qualified person. It doesn't have to be independent, but they have to be relevant to the properties that are under consideration in the registrant's portfolio. They also have to be an eligible member or licensee in good standing of a recognized professional organization. So a professional engineer or a professional national organization like the Society of Mining Engineers can be considered a qualified person requirement. You can also waive that 5-year guide if the QP can demonstrate a significant relevant experience in similar deposit types. SK 1300 allows for QPs to divide responsibilities. So there can be, and there probably should be, a number of QPs to help prepare that information. Which gives firms like Mining Plus an advantage as we bring skills in and experiences in from staff members who can participate in that. Probably the biggest divergence from 43-101 and SK 1300 is the QP under SK 1300 does not have to be independent of the registrant. So a registrant, larger mining companies, for example, could prepare their own data and submit that consistent with their annual filings, for example, making sure that they have the relevant qualified persons there. The one thing that qualified persons are required to understand is they can be subject to liability as experts under Section 11 of the Securities Act. So they have the same potential liability as an expert witness, for example. Now, the SEC has also said that third-party firms signing a report can stand in for individual QPs under that, and I think Lee will talk a little bit more about that. But it's important to understand that as you prepare the information required under SK 1300 as a qualified person, there is an expectation that you bring an expert responsibility to the work. Any questions? As Francisco has said, why We'll hold those questions until the end. Certainly write them. Be glad to attempt to answer them. And I appreciate your time and effort, and I will turn it over to Lee.
Thank you very much, Scott. Now, yeah, it is a pleasure to welcome you, Lee, for this second half of this webinar.
Thanks, Francisco.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's over to you, Lee. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Thanks for joining, everybody. My name is Lee Becker with M3 Engineering. I've been with M3 Engineering for 26 years now. M3 is based in Tucson, Arizona. We have offices in the US, Mexico, and 3 offices in South America. We're primarily an EPCM firm. We don't do the mining side, which is why we team up with people like Mining Plus to do that portion of the EPCM effort and the studies. We focus mostly on metals and mining, manufacturing. We do large telescopes in the world as well, and commercial projects as well. Our services are studies, which we're focusing on today, architecture, EPCM projects, inspections, audits, debottlenecking, and so on. A location of some of our projects. We've done projects all over the world. So getting right into it, I think we've seen this slide probably in different papers. I certainly don't take any credit for it. I don't know who first wrote it, but it sums it up pretty succinctly. A scoping study or preliminary economic analysis in NI 43-101 world, or initial assessment, as the SK 1300 calls it, should determine what a project could be. And it maybe only has to be one option. It's just here's a possibility. That's really all you need to do. It doesn't necessarily have to include a financial analysis. Just what could it be? Pre-feasibility study determines what it should be, and a feasibility study determines what it will be. So pre-feasibility study is really where you want to do a lot of the work, ironing out the trade-off studies, looking at your different options. So by the end of your pre-feasibility study, you should have a very good idea of what the project wants to be moving forward in the feasibility study, so that you don't have to revisit a lot of those trade-off studies during the feasibility study stage. You want to just develop the feasibility study itself based on the selected option. So what's the difference between a feasibility study, a full feasibility study, a bankable feasibility study, final, comprehensive, and definitive feasibility study? Well, according to the SEC, nothing. They're all equivalent. A feasibility study is a level of effort that they define, as well as the NI 43-101 defines, and there really isn't a difference. Not going to get into the details here, but here's the CIM definition of a feasibility study. You'll see that the first part of this is a comprehensive technical and economic study of the selected development option. Is exactly the same as, this is from the SEC, SK 1300, it's the exact same wording. So the idea is that feasibility study is based on the keywords in the first part of the sentence here is on the selected option. So again, as I stated in the beginning there, the pre-feasibility study should define, by the end of the pre-feasibility study, you want to define what it is that you're moving forward with at the feasibility study stage. Just another definition from NI 43-101, similar. This was an article I saw in doing some research, actually a couple of years ago, but it was a paper written by McKenzie and Cusworth, and they had use and abuse of feasibility studies, and they had some really good points in there. And some of the points that they brought up that I wanted to discuss a little bit is, the development of the studies and to the level of detail that a feasibility study should be brought to. In their experience, they say they're regularly portrayed as being much more comprehensive and accurate than they are, and they don't fit the intended purpose and tend to focus on technical issues. And I think that's true for a lot of studies. We're an engineer world mostly here, and I know there's exceptions, but we can definitely focus on the technical side of the picture, maybe a little bit too much at times, and not enough on the business side, and that needs to be taken into account as well. They did a update in 2016. Some of the bullets: a consistent lack of definition in feasibility study quality and content, accuracy, lack of the business objectives, project delivery focus within the study. Again, too much attention on the technical issues and not enough on the business side and the project execution side. Feasibility studies have shown a lack of integration of the business, sustainability, and technical issues. More bullets, but the bottom line is, feasibility study needs to be very thorough. It needs to take all these aspects into account and pull them all together. In the U.S., North and South America, because of the NI 43-101 law, due to BRIEX in Canada, a lot of people have jumped on that bandwagon, and so a lot of studies are done to the NI 43-101 requirements. As Scott said, we previously had Industry Guide 7 in the U.S. It's been replaced with SK 1300, and some of the differences Scott has addressed, and I'm going to pick up a few more here. The SK 1300 is actually 17 CFR subpart 229-1300, disclosure by registrants engaged in mining operations, and it's parts 1300. It's items 1300 through 1305. When the SEC started this, they made no bones about the fact that they were going to pattern the new SK 1300 after the NI 43-101. And one of the reasons they did that, they stated, was because the NI 43-101 had been adopted as law. Other foreign codes exist, but have not been adopted as law. They added the QP requirement, as Scott had stated. One of the differences in the QP requirement for the SK 1300 is that you don't have to be a degreed professional. You just need the 5 years of experience, meet the 5 years of experience required, as Scott had stated. The technical report summary is a requirement. In the technical report summary, and this is a point to note, is actually in part or item 601, paragraph 96, talks about technical report summary. At the end, I'll go to the SEC's website and show you how to find those. So there's really two different parts that you want to be looking at. It's not only the 1300, which is what we tend to call the report itself, but the 601 plays a major part in it and talks about the requirements of the technical report summary. 25 sections as opposed to 27 in the NI 43-101. They're similar, as Scott pointed out. A big point here that we want to make on the PEA level, or initial assessment level, in SK 1300 language, is that you can include an economic analysis that includes inferred mineral resources, but that economic analysis needs to be done including inferred resources and excluding inferred resources, and they need to be shown with equal prominence. And that's language right out of the part item 1302. We've hit on the qualified persons from NI 43-101, from SK 1300. In the SK 1300 document. There's a table 1, and again, I'll show that to you at the end here, how to find it. It's pretty prominent. So this is just one section of this table 1 in part 1302. The economic analysis in telling you what you need to do at the different levels for the initial assessment, the PFS and the FS. But the important point here is that the FS and even the PFS, you need a preliminary market study, and the market study is one where the SK 1300 is really kind of up the game on the requirements compared to what's required by NI 43-101. And they refer to it as a preliminary market study in the PFS and a final market study in the feasibility study. This is the language from SK 1300 with regard to the final market study. Basically saying it must provide the study must provide justification for all assumptions, which must include assumptions concerning the material contracts required to develop and sell the mineral reserves. Again, additional language. This is from the part 601 that talks about the technical report summary. This last part here is one during the commentary period that everybody needs to be aware of. It's one that got a lot of questions and comments, but it was deemed by the SEC to leave it in, so it's here in place. But the last sentence here, for all contracts with affiliated parties, discuss whether the registrant obtained the same terms, rates, or charges as could be obtained had the contract been negotiated at arm's length with an unaffiliated third party. So just people need to be aware of this, so they're properly addressing what's asked for by the market study for the various levels of the SK 1300 TRS. In supplying and providing the price used for the commodities, they've left the door open. SK 1300 SEC has left the door open a little bit compared to Industry Guide 7. You couldn't use future prices before, now you can. And in fact, basically the SK 1300 just says you have to justify how you got the price. You have to explain and justify how you got the price, but they don't really give you a lot of prescriptive methodology. This is an approach that M3 has used, where we use the 3 years historic price and 2 years of future forecast price. We say where we got the prices, and this is and we come up with, we do this on a monthly basis. So this is a method that we use often. We're not locked into this, and there's other options as well. But this is a publication that we put out monthly, and if anybody wants to receive this, just shoot me an email afterwards, and we can get you on the list to receive these commodity prices and what we would use using the 60-40 weighted average of historic prices and future prices. Just in building the feasibility study or PFS or even initial assessment, some of the work required for putting together the study, metallurgical test work, defining the process, sizing parameters. There's a series of test work that you're going to go through depending on the level of study, and actually the SME proceedings has a pretty good list of all the tests required or that should be performed at various stages of the study, and even basic engineering. So we won't go through these in detail, but these came from the SME proceedings. I think it's a 2-volume document, as I recall. Just another important point with regard to the SK 1300 in the item 601 again, under the DRS discussion, in paragraph 14 under processing and recovery methods, there's an instruction that says that if the processing method, plant design, or other parameter has never been used to commercially extract the valuable product for such mineralization, and is still under development, then no mineral reserves or resources or reserves can be disclosed on the basis of that method, design, or other parameters. So an important point to note if you've got a unique design that hasn't been used commercially. This is just a quick snapshot of a pre-feasibility study versus a feasibility study for a drawing count. This is one of our projects, and it's a U.S. copper project at pre-feasibility level, showing the different by discipline, engineering discipline, architectural discipline, the number of drawings that we performed at a pre-feasibility study stage versus the feasibility study stage. And you can see it's not quite double the number of drawings, but close. In the capital cost development, there's some language in the SK 1300 with regard to costs, of course. So this is from the AACE volume 47R-11, 2011. Basically, a class 5 is really where you're going to be at with a initial assessment. Class 4 is probably a PFS level, and class 3 would typically be at your feasibility study level. But you can see that the accuracy ranges would vary from, let's talk feasibility study level, anywhere from a -20 to a +30 on the accuracy. And this is, again, from that same table that I had referenced earlier. And you can see that for the feasibility study, they're looking for an accuracy of ±15%. It's actually the same numbers for both initial capital costs and operating costs. Contingency, they want to be less than or equal to 10%, which is a tough road to hoe. The bidding environment can certainly bring your bids in at ±10% pretty easily just in bidding climate. So that's a strong order right there, but that's what the language is. Just some information on what we would typically at a feasibility study level, what we would be looking for in terms of drawing level development to start putting the capital cost estimate together. We would want the general arrangements to be well developed, civil drawings to be well developed with a full MTO, material takeoff. The material takeoffs for concrete structural would typically be taken from the general arrangement drawings. Architectural quotes, you would get quotes for pre-engineered building and modular buildings, and the interiors would be well developed. Process and mechanical, of course, the process needs to be well defined at the feasibility study level, and even the pre-feasibility study level. But at feasibility study level, you're going to get quotes on all the major equipment and some of the minor equipment. And they're going to be based on MTOs for mechanical steel, liners, plate work. Usually your target you want to have quoted at a feasibility study level, probably somewhere in the 70 to 80% of all your equipment should be quoted. All your major equipment should be quoted, and some of your minor equipment to the point where you've got quotes for probably close to 80% of everything. And then historical pricing can be used to fill in the other information. Piping should be based on a full MTO, especially the infrastructure type piping that can be miles in length and large diameter stuff at times. Electrical would be based on a full MTO, and instrumentation would be based on a full instrument list. Financial analysis, of course, in the financial analysis, we're going to be looking at the NPV, the payback period, and the IRR. At the end of the day, that's the bottom line. Develop a cash flow estimated over the life of the mine based on estimates, capital expenditures, and production costs and revenue. At different levels, you're going to be doing different levels of work. At a PEA, the recoveries can be estimated based on similar projects. At feasibility study, you need to have test data for the recoveries, and you need to have test data for the different ore types. Treatment and refining charges at PEA level, they can be industry averages. At feasibility study level, you need to have the final marketing study as required by the SK 1300 requirements. Determine payable percentages, treatment and refining charges, transportation charges, penalties, concentrate percentages. The OpEx at a PEA is a high level factored based on similar projects. Feasibility study is detailed year by year. Oftentimes year 2 is stated as kind of a typical, not always the case. It depends on the mine startup and if it's phased, how it's phased, and so on. Reagents should be based on quotes. Labor rates should be attained for local contractors. Sustaining capital and closure capital at PEA, they can be an allowance, again, based on current industry typicals. For feasibility study, you need to have a plan, a closure plan worked out year by year, and whether it's a concurrent closure or not, and probably take into account the salvage value of the mining equipment at the end of mine life. Again, at feasibility study level, you're going to have depreciation, taxes, and so on taken into account. Of course, you need to take into the specifics for the country that you're working in. For example, recent project we were working on in Colombia, they have a VAT exclusion for pollution control equipment. So you want to get into the nuts and bolts of it and get into that kind of a level of detail. At the end of the day, the economic indicators you're looking for, NPV, IRR, payback in years, and then you're going to perform sensitivities on metal prices, initial capital, and operating costs at a minimum, and you can do sensitivities on other things as deemed necessary. So what I've got here, this is basically the end. I have a link here, so for anybody who wants a copy of this, there's a link that'll take you to the SEC's website for SK 1300, and you can, from there you can get to the part 600, which is where you'll find the 601 for the technical report summary. This is just a snapshot of that page that you'll see when you get there. If you were to click on this link within the Zoom environment, if I click on this, it won't work quite right. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you that site, but I have to stop sharing and then resharing with that screen that I've got open already. But you can see that SK 1300 is actually it's item 1300 through 1305. And let me just stop sharing, and I'll take you to that screen right now. Okay, so this is, hopefully everybody's seeing my screen. So this is the page that the link that I just showed you will take you to. And what you can see is, first of all, is if I just was to page down, I just want to point out this isn't a real onerous document. It's not all that terribly long, so don't be afraid of it. Get down here, this is that table 1 that I'd referenced a couple times in my presentation. Good information here for site infrastructure, mine design planning, process plant, environmental, other relevant factors, capital costs, operating costs, economic analysis. And then they've got additional tables in the next section as you pan down for suggested format for reporting your resources and reserves and so on. So this is the SK 1300, and that's the whole document. It's not that terrible. Now, if you go to get to the technical report summary, I should note the 601, the 229.601. I think there was a SME panel presentation, and somebody counted them and said that the 601 was referenced 68 times, as I recall. So it's the other important piece to this. And so this is the chapter, paragraph 96 within 601, and you can see that it requires, it talks about the technical report summary, and of course they refer to 229, 1300 through 1305. But then as you step through this, they'll tell you for each and every chapter, for chapter 1, executive summary, here's what you should include. For chapter 2, introduction, here's what you should include. Chapter 3, property description. Chapter 4, accessibility, climate. So we won't go through all those, but basically all 25 chapters are covered in this section. So just wanted to show you where to find this information, and I have it included as a link in the presentation here. If you go to, if you're in the one from the link, and if you were to click on part 229, it'll take you to all 229, and then you can click on the point 600, and it'll take you to there, and then just look for chapter 96. But that's what I have, and at this point we will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Lee. Yeah, let's begin now the Q&A session. So if you please have your questions ready, you can start typing your questions. Then also Scott can join us for the Q&A as well.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So I leave it with you guys.
Okay.
Be happy to answer any questions that might come up. One question that came up with the Q&A was regarding the independence of the qualified person. Under 43101, there is a factor of independence required, but under SK 1300, that requirement is not specifically stated. I'm sure that having an independent QP helps with the overall presentation of the data, but it is not necessary. Lee, any further thoughts on that?
No, I guess I think you answered it, but you know, probably the important point is like you had mentioned in your part of the discussion, is that the QP for SK 1300 can be for third parties. It doesn't apply to the registrants, but they can be signed off by the firm, and that's an important distinction from NI 43-101. So the SK 1300 states that not only can it be signed off as the firm, but you don't even have to name the people who worked on the report within that
Framework.
within that statement. Yeah, they don't have to be named at all. And that was an issue during the question and answer session, during the question and answer period from the, when they were during the development phase, and people were concerned about the Section 11, as you had mentioned, and being held liable. And so basically the SEC said, well, we don't make the oil and gas industry do this, so there's no particular reason why we need to impose this onto the mining industry. So they went ahead and adopted the same format.
A question has come up about the professional organizations that are considered to be acceptable under the SK 1300. One of the things to respond to that, thank you for that question, is that the SEC said they would not maintain a list of professional organizations that would qualify for as part of the QP the qualifications, but I guess in general, any nationally recognized organization that is relevant to the registrant's business properties that can publicly publish their list of members. So there is a clear transparency that yes, you or the QP is part of that organization and you're a member in good standing. That organization would be accepted by the SEC under the 1300 regulations.
Okay, there's a question here. A person is asking whether for a PEA study, what is the best discount rate to be used in the financial evaluation? That's a good question, and Scott and I think represent the consultant side. So I would say that that's a question for the owner and for the financial institutions. But I can tell you that we use anywhere from 5% to 10%. I rarely see anything go below 5%, and I rarely see anything go above 10% for a discount rate. With 5 and 7 and 8 probably being the most typical numbers.
Good question here coming in. Is there a requirement in SK 1300 to have boots on the ground, similar to NI 43-101? The short answer is yes. However, it appears there is some flexibility in absolutely confirming a site visit with the QPs. And however, you would want to spend some time in the report explaining why a site visit was not undertaken under the SK 1300. And I don't want to say justify, but justify why a site visit wasn't undertaken as part of the report preparation. So it's always a good idea. Certainly, qualified persons improve their knowledge with a site visit. It may be a little bit of a surprise, but I'm sure everyone can appreciate being able to touch and smell and see a site, to be able to appreciate the uniqueness of that particular deposit or that particular location. Lee, anything else that you would add to that?
Well, I couldn't agree more with the value that's gained out of a site visit. Especially when you get into areas of very rugged terrain, it's just really useful to have been there, seen it. There's a lot of value there.
And certainly anyone who has a question after this session obviously can email Lee or myself with questions. Be glad to answer those and keep in touch. So
yep. Yes.
Don't feel like you're missing the only opportunity you have.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing the questions. Yes, there is someone asking here about the recording. Yes, it is. The whole session is being recorded, so it's available on demand. You just need to go back after we finish the presentation and probably click on the link you receive. And then the recording will be available soon. Well, I think there are no more questions for the moment. So I would like to thank you again, Lee, Scott, for this wonderful time, wonderful presentation. And I hope that it has been quite useful for all the attendees. And as mentioned by Scott, they are available to answer any other questions you may have after revising again the presentations and the materials that we're going to share with you and the recording. So anytime we are also able to share with you their contact details so you can follow up with them. So that's for me is again a pleasure being here hosting this webinar for you. And if you want to address or say comment anything else that you want to mention, Scott and Lee.
No, just want to thank everybody for tuning in and appreciate the opportunity. And please contact us with any questions.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Perfect. Thank you, you both, Scott and Lee. So see you in the next time. And also, I would like to remind all the participants that please follow our website and our LinkedIn page. If you can please join us for further webinars that we are going to produce in the following weeks. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.